in the modern day, we're having all of these discussions of like justice and how it's evolving and how people kind of used to do things, and I think that's really cool. I think we should talk about the peacemaking thing, and I think that would be kind of the best. But education seems really pivotal in your life, like really focal.
For sure.
And I think many of us who are coming from indigenous communities know that education is often kind of like a good step ladder to get to a better life.
Well, I was lucky to be in a place in America where there are just tons and tons of Indians.
Right.
And so I remember I played on this baseball team forever, and the mom was, I believe she was Creek, and the dad was a white guy. But he was very proud of the fact that he at some point had an all-Indian infield. So it was his son and me, another couple of kids, and so to have somebody celebrate that, especially somebody who was in charge of something I really cared about so early on, was awesome. I think maybe some encouragement that I don't think most Native folks get in this country growing up. Totally separate from the Native piece, in school, I was really lucky to have teachers who took an interest in my intellect. And so even though I went to a really crappy school in a public school system, there was, if you could get yourself into that kind of top track, there was at least one teacher in every subject who was just dynamite. Right. And I was lucky enough to do that, and those teachers really cared. The college that I ended up going to was just this unbelievably eye-opening place because it's a school of 300 students, and it's all primary text and discussion based. So I never had a lecture until my first year in law school. Wow. And I don't think I ever had a class bigger than 18 until my first year of law school. And it was all primary text. So it was an all required curriculum. So a sophomore had already done exactly and everything that the freshman had done. The juniors had done exactly and everything that the sophomores and freshmen had done, and the seniors had done exactly and everything that everyone had done. And so that actually built a sense of community too, because seniors could talk to you not just, hey, I also took English Lit, but I took and read the very specific books you're reading. So it was a way to sort of communicate with upperclassmen. And so that was a super eye-opening educational experience. And then, law school came, and again, same thing. The teachers really take an interest in me. So honestly, I gotta say, most of my life has been people, for some reason, taking a chance on me and me doing my best to try to honor that by living up to it. And I gotta say, I think one thing that I think is missing in Native communities is the idea of possibility for opportunity, presenting that to students, that you can do these things, that these things are out there. They're not just for other kids, they're for Native kids too. So I do think sometimes that message is getting across, but getting it across in a way where those things really do feel possible, not just the platitude that you get from your parents, you can do anything you set your mind to, or you can be anything you want to be. Something that makes it concrete and feels like it's pursuable. I don't know I don't know how to change that or to push that more, but I don't know where I would have been otherwise.
I think your story is one of those that really speaks to kind of the agency that education can kind of present to you.
Yeah, that's right.
And those conversations are happening in Indian country. They're kind of slow.
So I've been in South Dakota every election since I want to say 2010.
Really?
We do voter protection on Pine Ridge and Rosebud.
Wow, that's so good.
I mean, the rest of the state too, but my particular students are on Pine Ridge and Rosebud.
Okay.
And we just lost, because I didn't know the process here. I didn't know the people. We lost funding to do it because we were about to go.
Right.
That's okay. We'll get them next election.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all good. When we started in South Dakota, there was stuff going on that, if you had read it in a textbook about the Jim Crow 20s, you'd have been like, this didn't really happen. Come on. And then after we had a presence there for a while, you started to see, certainly you weren't seeing those things anymore. You were seeing much more clever ways to try to keep people from voting. Simple things like telling a person their tribal ID didn't count as ID for voting. And so if you have somebody there watching the poll, they'll be like, no, that's actually not right.
Right.
That there's fewer shenanigans. Or things like telling somebody, you're supposed to be at this other polling place, which is 30 or 40 miles away. So first of all, most people don't even bother to take the next step to go, and who can blame them? But what would happen is people would get, the few who did, would get to the other polling place, and of course they were really supposed to be at the original polling place they were. And someone would say, oh no, you're supposed to be back there. Now nobody's going that third step and coming back. So stuff like that we're starting to see less of.
Right.
And then right before last election, the Supreme Court gutted the enforcement part of the VR. I want to say it was like Section 5 or something, but gutted the enforcement piece. So we saw a little more shenanigans, and I was expecting to see a lot more this time. So I'm sorry we're not going to be there.
I guess that kind of segues us into the peacemaking thing, because it sounds like what you're doing is like you're actively practicing, what you know with your law knowledge and your experience out there in the communities that's making a real change. I think it would be great to talk more about your education, but I think this is really cool because, with realms of indigenous law, I hate to say it, but it seems like no one's coming to save us. We have to be kind of out there advocating and making action happen quite often. Meeting that line of theory and activism and praxis. How do you kind of see indigenous justice evolving in the next few years as more and more of this indigenous knowledge and systems are being legitimized, by the academics?
To borrow like a term of art in the legal hiring community, I think it's going to go in-house. That's what's starting to happen now. So we've had tribal courts for any number of years.
Right.
The problem is tribal courts look exactly like white courts. They will, have some feathers and have some drums and some deer antlers and whatever else.
Right.
But in terms of the setup and the process, it's only the decorations that are different. Everything else is the same. But what has happened since tribes have gotten access to capital through gaming, frankly, is what it comes down to.
Quite often gaming.
I'd say the two kind of major cultural shifts have been tribes have started to create their own language immersion schools, which is just an incredible thing. My daughter goes to a Chinese immersion school, and so I've gotten to see firsthand how well language immersion works. So it's unbelievable. So I think that's going to really change how Indians interact in their own communities and outside of it, because there's something about speaking your indigenous language, which I don't, because Cherokee didn't have. We have it now, but not when I was growing up.
Sure.
Something about speaking an indigenous language, any language really, that allows you access to like the emotional side of being a human. Right. Even just watching my daughter interact with Chinese people in Chinese, and the access that she has to really understand what's being not said in words, but what's being communicated on a human level. It's just remarkable. And so culture is getting passed down that way, it's getting preserved that way. So that, I think, is one major development. And the other is tribes are starting to say, wait a second, we can resolve most of our problems, these kind of conflict things, ourselves.
Right.
Some tribes already have the mechanisms for that and just need to pull them out from the past. Right. They've been put away in a drawer. And other tribes are like, we got to go try to find these. So we don't know what drawer they're in, and also they might not be in any drawer at all. So we've got to go out and get them. And then other tribes are like, listen, we know we didn't used to do this, or if we did, it was so long ago that it's been in any real way lost. So we're just going to try to start from here, and we'll create it from here. We'll create a tribal sense of justice. And so I think you're starting to see those two kind of major cultural shifts happen. So it's going in-house. There are certainly issues with that. There are impediments. The Major Crimes Act, which gives federal jurisdiction over the kinds of harms that can befall a community that would be really worth investing their time and effort into resolving amongst the community. We don't get to do that.
Exactly.
The federal government does that for us. But with expanded jurisdiction with Wawa and Taloa, and we can talk about all the problems with that, and there are major problems with that. But just the idea that somebody in a non-tribal community is thinking, oh wait, maybe these Indians can solve some of these problems themselves. Or worst case scenario, somebody's like, you know what, we don't want to have to deal with those Indians anymore. Let's just let them do it. That's fine. Whatever the motivation is, getting tribes the ability to think through and solve these problems on their own it can only be a good thing.